Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you're all well, and welcome to the presentation and question and answer session about the Hazelwell station. There are going to be two officers present, one from Gavin Smith from West Midlands Rail Executive, and also John Mylett from Birmingham City Council. Both are going to do their presentations, Gavin first and then John, and then there's going to be the questions and answers that have been sent in. There are also, there's the chat bar, the speech bubble that you can put questions in as you wish. Also tell you this is being recorded live, and in the future you can watch this on the council's website. So without further ado, I'll introduce you to Gavin Smith with his presentation.
You're live, Gavin.
Hello, good evening, everybody. Can you just confirm that my presentation is up on the screen and visible?
It is now.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, so good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining this meeting, and thank you for extending the invitation to me to present to you an update on the Camp Hill proposals that we have, and Hazelwell railway station in particular. So let's just, excellent. So we should be on the second slide now, which shows a diagram of the railway network in and around the West Midlands area, and you can see the location of the proposed new stations at Moseley, Kingsheath and Hazelwell, and also illustrated the location of Birmingham New Street. So that really just gives you an idea of where the new stations are as places. When Hazelwell station is constructed, and it is still very much our intention to deliver the construction work in 2022. This is an artist's impression of the pick up and set down loop, which will be used by vehicles, cyclists and pedestrians to access Hazelwell station. On the left of the picture there, you'll see what is currently Cartland Road number 44. Bearing in mind, this is an artist's impression, so things may not be exactly as that they appear on this diagram, but it gives you a very, very good flavour of what it will look like. And then on the right is Cartland Road rising up and going over the existing road bridge. So at the centre of the slide, towards the background, is the entrance to the station from Cartland Road, and also a level access entrance to the station from the pickup and set down loop. This next slide gives an artist's impression of what it will look like to enter the station on foot from Cartland Road. If you were to stand in this location now, you'd be looking at the front of what is currently the bathroom showroom. So I think that gives you a good idea of how the site will be transformed. Now, this artist's impression is down on the station platform. This is actually on platform 2, which is the southbound platform for trains heading south to Kings Norton. You can see, I'll just point out a few features. We have got 40-metre long canopies proposed at all of the stations, so that's roughly the length of 2 carriages. And I think that's a real improvement on most modern station designs, which will feature a fairly simple bus shelter design. So I'm very pleased that the designs for these stations recognise the fact that we need a lot of space to enable people to obviously stay dry while they're waiting for a train, but also spread more evenly along the platform, and that's, I think, quite an important factor. Stations will also feature adequate seating. They'll also feature help points on each platform for both information requirements and emergency requirements as well. And at the background of this picture, you'll see the brick lift shaft that takes people from the Birmingham bound platform up onto Cartland Road. There is also a lift on the southbound platform as well. So the point here to make is that the station is fully accessible. So anyone who has reduced mobility can access all parts of Hazelwell station, and indeed Kings Heath and Moseley stations very, very easily. Now, there's been quite a lot of debate locally, actually, about whether the station should be called Hazelwell or Stirchley. And indeed, I think back in February, Birmingham Live ran a little bit of a poll. I don't know how many people voted. So what I do know is that 46% of the people who voted would rather it remained as Hazelwell, and 54% of the people who voted wanted it changed to Stirchley. But as I say, I don't know whether that was a result of 100 people, 1,000 people, etc. But what I would like to explore a bit further today is the views of everybody attending. Do people have a strong view about whether the station should be called Hazelwell or should it be called Stirchley? And if I could get I suppose a clear steer on that, that would be very useful. So that's something to think about. One of the things that our colleagues at Birmingham City Council will talk about in a bit more detail are the parking restrictions and traffic regulations around the new station. And I thought this map would be quite useful to show you. This has come out of the station travel plan and the transport assessment documents that were submitted as part of the planning application. The red star is the location of the new station. And you can see from the map that there is an area of double yellow lines all the way along Cartland Road. So that's clearly double yellow, no parking. And then there's some areas of a single yellow line with parking restricted to a maximum of 2 hours. And you can see that that's broadly within 250 metres of the station. So that's one of the things that clearly we welcome some discussion and debate on, and it's something that we will consider depending on the strength of feelings and the opinions that are given at the meeting. I thought it would also be useful to look in some detail here at the proposed vehicular access to the station. I think the important thing I want to point out here is that the stations, both Hazelwell, Kings Heath and Moseley, have really been designed around pedestrian and cycle access. We want to encourage pedestrians, we want to encourage local people to use these local stations and arrive on foot or arrive on bicycle, or maybe arrive by other means of public transport and interchange. What we don't want to do, and we very deliberately designed stations this way, is we don't want to encourage these as park and ride sites, because quite simply there isn't the space locally, and if you put in a small car park, not that you could actually fit one in really in this area, but if you put in a small car park, you then encourage people to come and have a look and see if there's any space. So what we've done very clearly is to say these are local stations for local people. We want you to arrive on foot or by bike. If you do need to drop off and then go, then at Moseley and at Hazelwell we have a pick up and set down loop. We don't have one at Kings Heath because the station is right on the main Ulster Road. So what we're looking at here is the proposed design for Hazelwell, and as you can see, it's a very simple teardrop shape in and out loop onto Pineapple Road. And based on our traffic modelling, we believe that there's about a space for about 5 or 6 cars in this area, and that should be sufficient to accommodate the predicted traffic levels. So of course the only reason you're arriving or using these stations is to use the train service into central Birmingham and perhaps further afield, or maybe south to Kings Norton. But either way, what I think is particularly exciting is that the proposal from West Midlands Trains is to use the brand new Class 196 diesel units that are currently under construction as we speak. Now, I've got some pictures here of the body shell of one in the factory in Newport in South Wales, where it's currently being fitted out. And on the right hand side is a picture of the inside of one of the carriages, and you can see the accessible toilet at the back. So I think it's very exciting for the station customers of the future for Hazelwell, that they will enjoy a new station with new rolling stock, and I think that's a really positive story to tell. I want to just touch on stations as places as well, as a concept. That's something that the West Midlands Station Alliance, which is an alliance of Network Rail, West Midlands Community Groups, West Midlands Trains, is pulling together. And the whole idea of stations as places is it puts railway stations at the heart of the communities that they serve. And what we will end up by producing is a kind of a series of prospectuses for every station on the network based on local knowledge and research. And it will allow us through these prospectuses to work more closely with local communities and businesses to improve the station environment and the overall customer experience. So things that would appear in each prospectus would be things like vacant property opportunities, facilities at the station, cycle and car parking, how and why people travel, accessibility, issues and opportunities facing the station and the local area, an action plan that addresses the issues, and contact details for those who are interested in signing up and making a difference. So I think it's quite an exciting proposal, and as I say, it's something that we're very, very passionate about. The West Midlands Rail Executive is to make stations, both our new stations that we're developing, but also existing stations, we want them to be community assets, and we want them to be embedded in the local community and not just imposed on the local community. And I've just got an image here of an example front page of a station as places prospectus. In this case, that's Kings Norton Station. So no doubt there'll be an opportunity for questions during the course of the meeting. That's my presentation concluded. So I'm now going to hand back to Councillor Locke, and I will stop sharing the presentation. Councillor Locke.
Councillor Locke, your mic's muted.
Forgive me, this is new. Thank you very much, Gavin. We'll now hand over to John Myatt from Birmingham City Council for his presentation.
Is the presentation on now?
Yes, it is, John.
Okay, brilliant. Good evening, everyone, and thank you again, as Gavin said, for inviting us along. WMRE are delivering the station, and jointly with working in partnership with the City Council, we are taking forward not just the station but also how that fits in with the surrounding area, how people access that station, and some of that was looked at through the planning application, and we got various comments in. But my presentation is going to sort of try and set the context, certainly where we're at now, following everything that's gone on this year, and how we want to take that forward, working with yourselves, working with Councillor Locke and yourselves as local people. So on the introduction, I'm the Transport Planning and Investment Manager at the City Council, and my colleague Tim Mitchell is also dialed in today. And we'll be leading on this from the City Council's perspective. There we go. So obviously this year everyone will be aware of the COVID-19 pandemic. Prior to that, we did actually publish the Birmingham Transport Plan for consultation, and hopefully everyone saw a copy of that and got your views across. And since then, we've also published the Emergency Birmingham Transport Plan, which was published in response to the COVID-19 epidemic. It is in line with the Birmingham Transport Plan, expands on it, and really pushes across that we need a green and sustainable recovery from lockdown and the COVID-19 epidemic, and the last thing we want is people going back to driving cars, or in fact driving cars more because they can't use public transport that has reduced capacity. So as part of that future, and this, we want to lock in the extra active travel that people have been doing throughout the period. Part of that future, we want to build towards the new Hazelwell station, new Kings Heath, Moseley, and other public transport initiatives that will be coming forward over the next few years. Public transport is reduced capacity at the moment, but we don't envisage that being forever, and certainly we're not changing our medium to long term strategy of promoting public transport. Sorry, this doesn't want to go to the next slide for some reason. There we go. So again, as people may be aware, we did publish the Emergency Birmingham Transport Plan in May, and that was partly in response to the Emergency Active Travel Fund, which was announced by government. Tranche 1 of that funding, I'll show you the plan of the 14 schemes that we are taking forward through that, but those schemes need to be delivered by September 2020. One of those is in Stirchley Local Centre, which I know that Councillor Locke has been working closely with my colleagues on, and there will be some proposals for that coming out, I think, later this week, early next week, which I think stakeholders will definitely be consulted on. And then there's also a low traffic neighbourhood in Kings Heath, which is part of that first tranche. The schemes for the Emergency Active Travel Fund have to be about reallocation of road space. It's about prioritising active travel over the private car. These are all things that we were already pushing through the Birmingham Transport Plan earlier this year, and I'd say we were aware of them and pushing them during the planning application stage. And that is why during the planning application, in discussion with Councillor Locke and other residents, we committed to not just the actual planning application proposals, which we can cover a bit further, and Gavin has already touched on with the parking but also a wider access strategy to the station to make sure that people are using active modes to get there. In terms of the Emergency Active Travel Fund, we're now urgently trying to get our bid together for Tranche 2, and we're currently looking at what schemes can go forward with that. There will be further low traffic neighbourhoods, and whilst this area won't have one from the Tranche 1 or Tranche 2, that we fully support low traffic neighbourhoods across the city, and will be pushing as part of this work for this area to become a low traffic neighbourhood, and for all the access to the station, as I say, to be active travel to be the main modes. This plan, we can circulate this presentation after, but this plan shows the proposals that we are taking forward through Tranche 1 of the Active Travel Fund. These just show a few of the schemes that we are taking forward in terms of modal filters, closing parking bays, so it's really all about active travel. So as I mentioned, there were concerns raised during the public consultation that we're aware of, and a lot of the questions that have come in prior to this meeting for us to answer about on-street parking, and we did commit, and through WMRE and ourselves, the on-street parking proposals in the planning application are exactly that, they're proposals. Everything will be done in consultation with local councillors and yourselves, so we really need to hear your views, and that's why we're here. There were also concerns about the impact of increased vehicle movements on road safety at Cartland Road and Pineapple Road Junction. People probably aware that a road safety scheme did go in there a few years ago, but the wider area, we are aware that we need to improve walking and cycling access to the station. And as I say, there's various ways of doing that. We think that a low traffic neighbourhood would be a good way to do that, and some of the modes, some of the measures that could go in as part of that. So the next steps in that, we need to get local intelligence of people. That's why we're here. One of the reasons we're here. We were hoping to hold with Councillor Locke a workshop earlier than this, but due to COVID, we haven't been able to do that. But as soon as we can, we want to get out and meet people and talk to you. And this is the start of that conversation about what you want to see in your local area. And this isn't just about the station, it's about transport in this area as a whole. We will need to do some data collection at some point. Unfortunately, there's a complete stop on any kind of traffic counts at the moment because of COVID and the fact that traffic levels have dropped so much. We don't quite know when we'll be at a point to do any further data collection, but that will, over the summer and autumn, hopefully we'll get towards that point. As I've gone through, we want to make sure that this is aligned with the COVID-19 response and the green, sustainable recovery from COVID-19. There's, as I've said, there's a lot of funding that government are bringing forward through the Emergency Active Travel Fund, but there will also be further funding going forward. And as Gavin said, there's the coordination with the Stations as Places prospectus. That is about green, sustainable access to stations. So we need to make sure that all the right things are within that Stations as Places prospectus. And there will be further consultation on that during autumn. That is led by the West Midlands Rail Stations Alliance, as Gavin said, but the Council and WMRE are key partners in taking those forward, and we'll work with you on that. Yeah, so any views, but I say just next steps. There will be further consultation held before and after station opening and in relation to the parking. This is the first step in that, and we will have the Stations and Places prospectus using feedback from this session and then future community workshops. So I suppose it's we're happy to take your questions now, and then there will be a lot of further engagement going forward in the future. And that's me done for now. Happy to take any questions. So I'll hand back over to Councillor Locke.
Thank you, John. Now, Karen Sheeny is going to put the questions that came in via email, and then I know a number of you have put questions on the question and answer panel, and we'll do those afterwards. But first of all, the ones that came in by email.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Locke. The first one is around the station name, which came from Gray Parker, which was around I'd like to ask if the station name could be Stirchley Station rather than Hazelwell. Whilst Hazelwell may have historic significance, I feel that Stirchley Station would feel a lot more authentic for the local community and bring more sense of local pride and ownership. But Gavin and everybody else, you will see that there's quite a mixed response that's on the chat box, and I think somebody put it very eloquently that there probably needs to be a lot more consultation about the name. Some people have said it's not all in Stirchley. Some of the issues are around confusing for Stirchley High Street. But I don't know whether, Gavin, you want to come back on that particular one first.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting to see some of the comments that have been put up on the chat bar. So thank you for getting involved in this. And I think what it shows is not a clear-cut decision by any way or means, is it? It's not as if 80% of the people are saying one thing and just 20% the other. It seems to me fairly evenly split, and there's some quite interesting sort of issues that have been flagged up. So I think you're right. I think it does need a lot more consultation on this. I think there's certainly an appetite for a bit more of a debate. So I will be recommending to the rail executive that we do have some form of formal consultation fairly soon, because obviously once you get so far down the design stage of a station, it becomes more difficult to change it, particularly when you're starting to update engineering drawings, signalling diagrams, and the National Railway timetable. It's not just a case of substituting one station name for the other. It becomes quite complex. So now is the opportune time to do that. And as I say, I will be recommending that we conduct a much wider piece of consultation on this, and watch this space, I think, is what I'd like to say.
Okay. Gavin, I'm going to keep you there live for the moment, because the other question specifically about the trains was whether there are any plans to go beyond Kings Norton, and if so, on what time scale? And that's come from John. Okay.
So at the moment, we in the Rail Executive are working very closely with Network Rail and West Midlands Trains to design a timetable that not only serves the Camp Hill lines but also doesn't cause performance issues elsewhere on the network. And I think if you're a regular rail user pre sort of COVID and lockdown, you would probably have been well aware of some performance issues that West Midlands Trains customers have experienced. And clearly what none of us want to do is to design a timetable that causes problems elsewhere on the network. So it's very, very important that we work together as an industry to not only provide a good, attractive timetable for Hazelwell and the other Camp Hill stations, but we don't want to cause performance problems elsewhere. Now, in terms of where the trains will go, I mean, clearly they will go to Birmingham New Street. Going south, I think it's most likely at the moment that they will still terminate and then start back from Kings Norton. But I don't think I could say that will always be the case. I think, you know, we will keep our options open in whether we actually extend the trains further south. The other thing to bear in mind, and we're looking at longer term here, but in the longer term, there is a much larger scheme called the Midlands Rail Hub, which is being promoted by Network Rail. And the whole idea of the Midlands Rail Hub is to unlock and expand capacity for the rail network in the West Midlands. And it does that by introducing connections from the Camp Hill line up onto the former Great Western Main Line that runs from the Tyseley direction into Birmingham Moor Street and Birmingham Snow Hill. So with these what's known as the Bawdsley cords, you could actually run a train from Kings Norton along the Camp Hill line and into Birmingham Moor Street. And also from the other direction, you could run a train from, say, Leicester or Derby into Birmingham Moor Street as well. Now that's important because it frees up the capacity at Birmingham New Street. So it actually gives a lot more additional options for train services along the Camp Hill line. There's also a future aspiration for Network Rail to electrify the Camp Hill line. I hasten to add that's not something that's, you know, going to happen within the next 5 to 7 years, but looking longer term, there is an aspiration to fill in this sort of gap in the electrification. So there's some exciting plans looking long term for the Camp Hill line. I think my focus though is to get these stations built and get the train service that we've talked about up and running. We've looked at a half-hourly frequency, 2 trains an hour, Birmingham New Street at one end and Kings Norton at the other, and I think let's stick to that at the moment, get that service up and running, get it reliable, and get people using that service and enjoying that service, and then we can look to expand through the Midlands Rail Hub in the future. Hopefully that answers that question for you.
The other questions that's specifically around the trains is somebody's just put on, how loud are these new diesel engines?
Okay, well, clearly they are diesel, so they will make a noise. I'm afraid I can't give you a sort of a precise decibel reading or anything like that. But what I would say is they are the newest form of diesel engine, so they will be the greenest form of diesel and also the quietest form of diesel engine, so they would be considerably quieter than, for example, a cross-country Voyager or a high-speed train that maybe people are familiar with. Certainly a good deal quieter than a freight train that you might hear along the Camp Hill line from time to time. So yes, they are diesels. Yes, there will be a noise, but in terms of you know, the volume, certainly significantly less intrusive than existing diesel trains on the network.
Thank you. The rest of the questions are all relating to parking. I don't know whether it's John or yourself, Gavin, that would answer these. So maybe I'll pose the questions. Gavin, you might want to start, and then John, I may well bring you in to answer as well, if that's okay. So the first one, and there are quite a number of these around parking restrictions. One question was from Jill Brook, which was, what parking restrictions will be put in place on Pineapple Road in particular and other local roads to prevent all-day parking? Although we have been told they expect the majority of people will walk or cycle to the station, this is unlikely to be the case. Hazelwell station will in fact be more accessible to people living in parts of Kings Heath, Brandwood or Billesley, for example, than Kings Heath station itself, and is far more likely to attract people from those areas who will use the local roads to park on. while I welcome the station being reopened, I wouldn't want it to be to the detriment of the local area, which is currently a lovely place to live. And there've also been additional questions that from the Dad's Lane Community Centre, which is opposite the station, which Steve's put on, which talks about how that might impact on their users if there is a 2-hour waiting restriction, and also for residents that any 2-hour waiting restriction will mean that residents who live within the boundary won't be able to park on the slip road parallel to Cartland Road. So I think there is an array of questions about the actual parking and any restrictions that are put on that. So I don't know whether you want to start, Gavin, and then I'll hand that over to John.
Yes, I'm happy to start. Can you hear me? That's you still hear me?
Yes, yeah.
Excellent. So, I mean, I think both ourselves and Birmingham City Council, we do recognise the concerns that have been raised about on-street parking. We will be monitoring very closely the parking habits and monitoring of the restrictions over the first 6 months of the station opening. So we will be looking to see how effective our proposed restrictions are, and to see if that's causing any sort of inconsiderate or illegal parking or any parking overspill. And I think if we find that there are problems arising from on-street parking, then we will, in consultation with local residents and businesses, have to develop and introduce alternative controls. As I've said earlier, I mean, the proposed restrictions along Cartland Road consist of double yellow lines on the east-west axis. And then along Pineapple Road and Cartland Road, the residential access road, it is that maximum wait time of 2 hours, Mondays to Fridays between 9 and 5. So obviously before 9 and after 5, then the parking restrictions do not apply. However, I mean, I would say that at this stage, these aren't set in tablets of stone. And it is, as with all of these things, I guess, a balance between meeting the local needs of residents and their concerns, but also meeting and dealing with their concerns about parking, commuter parking. So we believe at the moment this is the right balance, but we are flexible. But as I say, this isn't set in tablets of stone. But I would probably say that I genuinely don't believe that these stations are going to encourage rail-heading people sort of driving and parking on local streets, as people may imagine. It will be actually quite inconvenient and very difficult for somebody to drive their private car and park anywhere near Hazelwell station very easily. So I think, the way that the stations are designed and the facilities that they have for pedestrians and cyclists and the parking restrictions that we are proposing will actually deter people from driving there in large numbers. I mean, clearly I can't sit here and guarantee that no one will drive to Hazelwell station ever. That would be something I clearly couldn't commit to. But I think, we have designed out, if you like, the desire for people to actually turn up by car and park somewhere, nearby the station where they'd find it easy access. John, I don't know whether you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, am I on now?
You are.
Yeah. Just to agree with what Gavin said, the proposals haven't changed since the planning application. So everyone can access those, but that's not to say they can't change before they're delivered. There's lots of different restrictions that we could put in. we could go down if the 2-hour limit is an issue. We could look at different restrictions, such as a no parking between, I don't know, 11 and 12 or something, which then has a 1 hour. But there's pros and cons for any kind of restrictions that we put in. And if we put no restrictions in, as one of the comments has said, there could then be issues from people driving. But I think, as Gavin said, actually people railheading, as in driving a long way to then park at these stations, is probably quite unlikely, because you'll have probably driven past a cross city line station to get there, which will have a much better rail service to start with. In terms of local people driving to them short distances, that's something we really want to discourage, and that's why we need to make sure that the walking and cycling access to these stations is good, and that is why we didn't, on any of the new stations within Birmingham, we haven't put in car parks, even where at Moseley there may have been space, because we do not want to encourage people to drive to these stations. So it is getting that balance between local, not inconvenience local residents, because whether it's perceived or not, there will be cars parked outside their houses all day from commuters, but also meaning that people can get access to their house during the day for visitors and carers and the like, and deliveries, and that's partly why we're here to discuss that. But as we get closer to the station opening, then, as Gavin said, there will be further, more formal consultations on what people do want to see.
I'm going to keep you there, John, because I think the next question is probably relevant for you. The station proposal includes creating vehicle priority in an area that has now been designated a low traffic neighbourhood. How will the plans be changed to reflect this? And then the second one, the road safety audit, which was only uploaded as evidence 2 weeks before the station was given approval, identifies there will be an increase in accidents directly associated with the access design. Will the access design be changed to prevent this? And the third bit to that question, City Council identified that there would be a review of pedestrian and cycle routes to the station following feedback during the station planning application, and the identification that pavements and pedestrian crossings are currently substandard. Is there any feedback on this particular review?
I can probably sort of wrap that into one. I mean, there's various views, and we had them during the planning application on whether the proposals were or were not appropriate for a future proposal for a low traffic neighbourhood. As I said during my presentation, we were taking forward low traffic neighbourhoods at that point, and we're definitely taking them forward now with the emergency active travel funding. I think we're going to get about, from tranche 2, we're going to get about £4 million from government, but that's to spread across the whole city. So it doesn't actually go that far. But certainly no traffic neighbourhoods are a key element of the Birmingham Transport Plan that will hopefully be adopted later this year. And walking and cycling access to these stations is key to that. We would have hoped to have come out and held a workshop by now to take this forward, and I know I've been in constant dialogue with Councillor Locke about at what point we'd be able to do that. It is quite difficult to do those workshops over virtually, so as soon as we can, we'll get out and speak to you on that. My colleague Tim's here because he'll be helping us to take that piece of work forward. But yeah, we're definitely committed to reviewing cycling and walking access to the station. And that will be alongside the parking work as well. The parking work is a commitment through the planning application, but we also committed as a council to that review of the wider access. And I think the low traffic neighbourhoods really emphasises that and shows that we are committed to this. As I say, this area is probably not going to be a formal low traffic neighbourhood through tranche 2, because we've had to prioritise areas so with around local centres, and but as the station comes forward, obviously this area will be a high priority, and I will recognise the safety concerns that have been highlighted, and the safety scheme did go in previously. People have flagged up that there will be further safety concerns, particularly with more walking and cycling to the station and on that junction. So ahead of the station opening, we'd hope to have some measures in, and yeah, more than happy to work with local people and the councillors to take that forward.
And the final one, which I think is for you, John, there have been a couple both on the live Q&A but also pre-questions that have raised the issue that during the lockdown, the roads in the area experienced a significant increase in speed. Will a low traffic neighbourhood solution to this be considered before the proposed railway station perhaps compounds the issues? And there's also one on the Q&A that says the same thing. Speeding has been an issue during recent changes because the roads are straight. Can speed measurements be done now? Yeah, so I'm repeating myself a bit, but yeah, we will definitely be looking at a low traffic neighbourhood for this area as part of the wider station access. We want to do that for all residential areas across the city. People have probably seen that Councillor Zaffer, our cabinet member, wrote to government asking for citywide 20-mile-per-hour zones. The government wrote back and said, not at the moment. So we are trying to take forward 20 mile, and this area I believe is a 20-mile-an-hour zone already. So it's something we're trying to roll out, and enforcement of that is something that we work closely with councillors and with the police on. And I appreciate what people are saying, and we've had reports from various other places that if there's less traffic on the roads, people tend to speed more, and that's why we really need to make it a pedestrian and cycle priority on all residential roads across the city, and that's really what we're aiming for. We want to lower the speed limits, and that's just part of the low traffic neighbourhoods, making sure people can get access to the services they require in their local area without getting in their car, and encouraging people that for journeys under 2 miles you really don't need to be getting in your car, unless you, obviously some people are have disabilities and do need to, so we're not saying no one should get in their car, but yeah, we really, I encourage I'm encouraged by the comments that are coming through, that so many people seem to support us in bringing forward low traffic neighbourhoods, and say there were conversations about that at the planning application and post it. So yeah, we're happy to speak to people going forward, and any ideas you've got, please get them into us. Obviously I will temper that with it is funding dependent, and so we've got £4 million, which I'd love to have in my bank account, but it's across the whole city, it's not that much in the grand scheme of things, but we do believe there will be a lot more funding coming forward along the lines of sustainable and active travel. So we will have further funding streams coming forward, and we will be prioritising our capital programme, the money that we can control, towards these measures in line with the Birmingham Transport Plan. So yeah, hopefully that gives people a positive outlook that we will be looking at this seriously. Sorry, I did say that was the last one, John, but there is one more, and actually it's quite interesting. There are a couple of comments that we've had in beforehand, and I think one that's on the Q&A around the grassland that actually fronts some of the houses set back on Cartland Road. One comment is, could that be turned into a small car park? The trees could be retained, but similarly there are other comments where people say, what measures are going to be put in place to stop people from parking on that green space?
Yeah, I think as I said before, we wouldn't want to put in a car park, because even particularly probably a small one, because it does encourage people to drive, and then when the car park's full, they then find somewhere else to park, and cause nuisance and cause issues. In terms of stopping people parking on there, I think that would be probably an enforcement issue, but we can also look at physical measures as part of the wider study that we're going to do, looking at access to the station. But yeah, we're happy to obviously listen to those views, and but I'd say the one thing we're not going to do is put a car park on there. But yeah, in terms of enforcement and physical measures to physically stop people parking on there, we can look at it. It may be that, as Gavin said, we will be monitoring going forward once the station's in, and if that becomes an issue, then that's something we could then probably justify cost some funding towards dealing with, or we could do it before, but we'd have to take a view on that once we've spoken to the people concerned.
Thank you. I'm going to put Gavin live and see if you want to answer some of those questions as well, Gavin. And then there's 2 or 3 more that are specifically related to trains and the station.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of the parking issues, I think probably, you know, what John has said earlier pretty much covers my position on parking as well. Certainly, we wouldn't want to encourage people to drive to any of these stations, because there simply isn't the space to accommodate, you know, a large car park, which is, you know, maybe what you would need. So having a small car park is, I think, the worst of all worlds. It will get full up very quickly, and then people would drive around and look for somewhere to park their car and cause a nuisance. So there's you know, that is not on the agenda for any of these stations. Did you want me to sort of pick up some of the railway related?
Yeah, there were 3 others that came through. One about, could the trains be replaced with battery powered metro trams instead? Will any acoustic fencing be put up to protect people's gardens? And the last one was, when will the stations be open? Originally, the date was 2021, but this already appears to be 2022. Could this be delayed further and beyond, for example, bearing in mind, obviously, COVID and the Commonwealth Games infrastructure?
So I think in the order that they were asked, could the trains be replaced with battery powered metro trams? No, there's absolutely no plan to convert this into a light rail tram route. I mean, it is actually what's known as a heavy rail route. It has express passenger trains cross country, have trains running down to the West Country and South Wales along there, and then north to Manchester. There's also a lot of freight traffic along that route as well. So we won't be running, you know, a tram train type of operation along that route. In terms of battery trains, that's quite interesting though, because there is quite a lot of interest within the industry to develop more bi-mode trains, and we have bi-mode trains already running, which can switch from the overhead power cables to a diesel engine. But we are working with the industry to look at the possibility of hybrid power with batteries, so a train can actually run under the wires, charge its battery, and then run off the wires on the battery. And I think there are, as the technology develops and the battery range gets greater, there could be opportunities within the West Midlands area to actually run these bi-mode trains that run under the wires and also on batteries. But whether that will be on the Camp Hill line, I couldn't really say at this moment in time, but it's certainly something the industry is looking at. In terms of acoustic fencing, now the current plan is not specifically for acoustic fencing. It's clearly we will put proper, quality line side fencing that would prevent trespass and vandalism into people's property, and that's something that we would do as a matter of course. Acoustic fencing tends to be sort of solid wood or concrete fencing and fairly high to prevent noise from trains passing at speed. So you would tend to have that, on high speed rail lines rather than suburban rail lines. But, if that's something that local residents, have a particular view on, that's certainly something I could take away and explore further. I mean, I think when you look at what additional noise is going to be created, then certainly we've had questions raised in the past about the public address system at the station, because the stations will have a PA, but clearly that can be controlled in terms of what time it's switched on, what time it's switched off, and the volume it's set at. So local residents needn't be worried that they will be hearing the train announcements, throughout the night at a high volume, because we can control that and work with local residents as to what is acceptable. But in terms of, acoustic fencing, as I say, at the moment, there's nothing specific planned. But if there is a specific need raised, it's something that we can go away and explore further. But it would certainly be a very intrusive structure, and perhaps, something that's not necessarily very pretty, because that's the nature of that type of fencing. The final question, this is the $1 million question, isn't it? When are these stations going to be open? And the person who posed that question is right. Originally the date was 2021. Yes, it's currently 2022. Could it be delayed further? I'll be honest with you, yes, it could be, for the very reasons that the questioner has put down there. I mean, these are complex schemes for a number of reasons. The infrastructure, particularly at Moseley, is quite complex because of the building a station in a very deep cutting. The timetabling issues with Network Rail are very complex as well, adding trains to an already very, very busy network. So it's railway schemes, they might appear simple on the outside, but when you sort of scratch away at the detail, they do become very, very complex. I very much hope that, and certainly I am working to the time scale that I've mentioned before, and that is to get the stations up and running and open at December 2022. That's what we said before, and that's what we're currently working to. But I would be wrong and say, could they be delayed? Well, yes, I suppose they could. It's not my wish, it's not my intention, it's not what I'm planning for. But yes, I suppose, anything like that is possible given the things that your questioner mentions.
Thank you, Gavin. And then the last question, which is probably for yourself and John, a collection of questions around the number of accidents in what is already quite a dangerous junction from Cartland into Pineapple, and some worry that the entrance for cars will cause trouble in an already tricky junction. It's notorious for accidents already, and there are a number of questions that came through on the pre-questions that echoed the same worries in terms of that junction, and that perhaps there should be a no right turn on traffic from Pineapple Road into the station drop-off zone. So I don't know whether there are any comments from yourself, and then I'll pop John back on as well.
Well, I think, this probably comes back to, when we submitted the proposal to Birmingham City Council, obviously we have completed a road safety audit, stage 1. We need to do a stage 2 audit as well at the next stage of detailed design. We have, as part of the transport assessment, looked in great detail at the accident statistics for the entire area and that junction. And I mean, in terms of the volume of traffic going across that junction compared to the number of reported accidents, our traffic modelling and our assessment indicates that, you know, the addition of the station isn't going to be a material sort of change, if you like, to the accident statistics or the risk ranking of that junction, because of the existing volume of traffic that goes across there and the existing accident stats. So as I say, we don't feel from our modelling that by adding Hazelwell station into the mix makes that junction a riskier junction. Although, as I've said before, you know, we will monitor very closely the impact of the station development on the local highway network over the 6 months following its introduction. And if we need to do anything different, if there are other interventions that are needed, then that's something that we will do in conjunction with the City Council, because clearly, you know, safety is everyone's top priority. So it's important that we work closely with the City Council and with local residents to deal with any issues that arise. But John, I don't know whether you want to add anything to that or build on that.
Your mic's on mute, John.
Yeah, so I'd echo what Gavin said and probably build on it, that this is why we committed to doing the wider study. When we assess the junction, we have, for road safety schemes, we have set criteria on what we can spend. So going back a step, actually, we have our capital programme and we have £500,000 a year that is set aside for local safety schemes. We have set criteria on what they can be, what that money can be spent on, which is nine collisions within a 3-year period. Obviously, that is 9 collisions that are recorded and sent to us by the police, which means that damage only aren't counted, that some people may be aware of. But that's the information and data we've got. So when we were assessing this as part of the planning application, that junction doesn't register and doesn't get those, doesn't meet those criteria. So it wasn't, from our perspective, and looking at the travel plan and the transport assessment that was put forward, we couldn't justify asking WMRE to specifically do a road safety scheme at that junction. What we did commit to, because we know there are concerns, and certainly were made very strongly, that if we have a lot more people walking and cycling, well, that could increase pedestrian and cyclist accidents at that junction. And that's why we've committed to this wider study, looking at walking and cycling access routes, looking at crossing facilities in that area and linking to the station. When, as I said, happy to look at proposals for low traffic neighbourhoods across this area. There's one going in King's Heath, say, as part of tranche 1, and then we're looking at measures in Stirchley as well. So yeah, we appreciate there are concerns, and there are accidents there. It didn't meet the criteria for the planning application to address it, but as Gavin has said, we will be monitoring the situation, and the City Council, West Midlands Rail Executive and West Midlands Combined Authority, we're all committed to working with local people to make sure that we've got that walking and cycling to this station is prioritised over the private car, and that there is safe access to the station. And we've got a couple of years to do this, but as I said before, we'd have had a workshop by now if it wasn't for COVID. So as soon as we can, we'll get out there and speak to people and move this forward.
Thank you. I think that has covered all the issues around parking, and just for viewers who are watching, both Gavin and John have got a list of the questions that came in, and we'll get a list of all the questions that have been asked live. So my apologies if I've missed any out. But there is one final question, which is for Gavin, which is around the actual station itself. And that's, will the middle platforms at Kings Norton be used for Camp Hill line trains? And will that mean the brickyard that is currently there will be cleaned up?
Right, so I think the questioner is asking about the currently redundant platforms 2 and 3 at Kings Norton. So Kings Norton's a slightly odd station insofar as platforms 1 and platforms 4 are the only platforms currently in use, and they're electrified for the cross-city lines. Platforms 2 and 3 are not fully electrified, so an electric train can't run through them. The plan at the moment, very much for the Camp Hill line, is to start and terminate in platform 4 at Kings Norton. Platform 4 is currently the southbound cross-city line. Now, one of the things that the industry needs to look at is how we actually create capacity at Kings Norton, and that could be by reinstating the existing platforms 2 and 3, and it could be by doing a small piece of infill electrification, which will enable platform 2 or 3 to reopen for cross-city services. So these are the sort of things that we're currently working very closely with Network Rail looking at. But certainly the plan at the moment is that the Camp Hill trains arrive and depart from platform 4, which is the southbound cross-city platform. And the reason I say that is that the signalling that's there at the moment allows you to do that. You would have to re-signal the station to allow a train to actually arrive and then depart back from platforms 2 or 3. And obviously starting to re-signal locations is actually a very lengthy and expensive business, and something that we would rather not do if we can avoid it. So hopefully that answers that question. And I guess the brickyard that is currently there means the state of the existing platform, I'm assuming, and not a commercial brickyard, which must be something I've missed on my travels through there.
Thank you. I think that's all of the questions and the themes of questions. So I'm now going to hand it back to Councillor Locke.
Right, thank you, Karen, and thank you, John and Gavin. I think there's a lot there for us to digest and also to think about, and I would like to have a workshop. One was, as been mentioned tonight, one was originally planned, but due to COVID it couldn't go ahead. But I think we do need to have one when the time is right, when face-to-face meetings are more appropriate, and possibly have it at maybe Dad's Lane community centre, because then it's right on the doorstep of the proposed station, and people, if it's a drop-in, people can come. There may be more detailed plans by then, so they can put in their questions and answer and get answers, and you know, both the officers can get a picture, and there'll be more information and more further along with the proposed station. I mean, I know Moseley is still waiting for planning approval, I believe, but there's still a lot to do and a lot to talk about, and we haven't finished with the subject yet. So thank you all tonight for coming, signing in and listening. Bear with us, and we will have another meeting. Thank you, Karen, Kay, John and Gavin, and I hope to stay safe and see you all soon.
Thank you.